Aventurine! Yep, he's running again, and if you're on the fence about getting him, get him. You won't regret it. Is an imaginary sustain that focuses on shields, and by shields, I mean shields. With the right stats, you'll be tanking the hardest hitting attacks with ease, so much so that it's kind of ridiculous how strong his shields are, especially when he's incredibly easy to build as you primarily want two stats, defense and speed. And if you want a bit more damage, crit is always great, but he's a follow-up attack unit that can dish out some pretty okay damage while providing a 15% crit damage debuff to a single enemy. Aventurine isn't just for the follow-up team comp. Nope, he's a sustainer first that can be slotted into pretty much any team whatsoever. While he has his strengths and other units can provide better utility for some archetypes, notably Hua for Dot and Link Shot for Break, in terms of comfort and keeping your team alive, no one beats him in that department. His premium team is the Fart team, which does have a focus on follow-up attacks as he's a perfect sustainer for Fei Xiao, Topaz, and Robin, but works extremely well with Dr. Ratio, who was free. He's amazing with Acheron teams as she doesn't have a dedicated premium sustainer, but Aventurine provides so much comfort that it doesn't really matter who's on your team as they will not die. His ult provides a debuff and you can resort to getting his weapon to help her out a bit more, but more on that later. He can also be used in hypercarry teams, as once again he provides a single target crit damage debuff to an enemy and your teammates just won't die. Don't have a Hua for Dot? Well, you can start an Aventurine. Why? Do I have to repeat it? The comfort of his shields. I kid you not, he is the genre of HSR for people who play Genshin, and can be used anywhere. Obviously he has his specialization in follow-up, as do the other sustainers, but his shields are unmatched. Since his release in version 2.1, Aventurine hasn't done many changes, which is great because he remains absolutely broken, and I am a firm believer that he will continue to stay broken even in 3.x. As we all know, power creep is very bad in HSR, but sustainers and supports have it easier. With Hoyo trying to buff hypercarries, these units benefit from Aventurine's crit damage debuff. And really, how can you power creep not dying? Unless you get enemies who can penetrate shields, which does sound a bit ridiculous, he is still an absolute must pull unit if you need another 5-star sustain, or you need your first premium sustain unit. His shields are so strong that you won't have to stress in Golden Gears and Swarm Disaster. Even in the new unknowable domain, the enemies struggle with penetrating his shield as, well, he's always refreshing them and getting new ones. These babies stack and it allows your team to focus on doing damage. I've even used him for Firefly. While I didn't pull for a Ling Shaw and he doesn't do all the crazy buffs that she does, he stops the enemy from killing your teammates. Lingsha is absolutely incredible for breaks. She provides so many buffs, does phenomenal personal damage, all while healing and cleansing your team. But in terms of keeping your units alive, I pull Aventurine just for the comfort. I have a great Fushuan who carried me throughout the toughest parts of the game, but even she struggles when the enemy just does so much damage as her team healing isn't all that great and enemies are just starting to do an abysmal amount of damage. It almost feels like her sustain value is starting to fall off. Now with the Aventurine, however, that's not to say that Fushuan isn't still a top tier unit. She is, but in terms of pure sustain, comfort, and not having to worry about dying, Aventurine just takes the cake for me. Remember, a shield acts as a secondary health bar that can be refreshed and stacked to a higher amount, while other sustains provide healing and there's always a chance that the enemy has a one-shottable move that negates the healing, or you just weren't able to reach their turn fast enough, especially with the speed of these enemies. With Aventurine, I feel like he's always giving my team a shield even when it's not his turn. Going over his kit, his skill will apply a shield known as Fortified Wager that scales with defense, and his shield is stackable up to 200%. So feel free to refresh the uptime on this, or if you want a fatter shield. For his talent, whenever an ally has Fortified Wager, aka his shield, this increases their effect res, and whenever they are attacked, Aventurine will gain 1 stack of Blind Bet. At the bottom you can see how many points of Blind Bet he has. When they reach 7, he will unleash his follow-up attack, doing imaginary damage based on Aventurine's defense on a random enemy. And these points can overflow, because often enough you will be hit with multiple attacks, and thus you will be gaining a lot of points. Just like the gambler he is, his ult will randomly give you 1 to 7 stacks of Blind Bet, deal a bit of single target damage to an enemy, and they will have a crit damage debuff on them lasting for 3 turns. His basic attack is his basic attack, and for his technique, you will gamble and gain one of the following 3 buffs to all party members. Peaceful Calm, which increases defense by 24%, Still Waters Run Deep increases defense by 36%, and Pouring Rain, which increases defense by 60%. All which lasts 3 turns. And you can just spam this until you roll the Pouring Rain one. Just note that even if you don't, you will retain the highest buff that you rolled. He also has some very nice bonus abilities. The first one being Hot Hand, which will grant all party members a shield equal to 100% of the one provided by his skill for 3 turns whenever you enter battle. It's just a free shield just by existing, so you can skip out on using his skill for the first turn, or you can skill again and gain a shield for 200%. His next one is Leverage, which every 100 defense that exceeds 1600 for Aventurine, he gains crit rate. This is super helpful for his builds as you want 4000 defense to max this out for a free 48% crit rate. And finally, for his last bonus trait, whenever an ally launches a follow-up attack, Aventurine will gain a stack of Blind Bet. This can trigger up to 3 times and resets once his turn comes around. Additionally, once he launches his follow-up attack, all allies will gain a small shield, and whoever has the lowest shield at that point will receive an additional shield. Basically, whenever you do a follow-up attack, you will gain a shield on top of shields. Now, for his builds. Due to Aventurine shields and follow-up attacks scaling off of defense and his bonus abilities scaling off of defense, it's pretty easy. You want 4000 defense minimum. Of course, more is always good if you want a stronger shield, but due to him getting a free 48% crit rate for just building defense, you can also opt to have a crit damage body piece for extra damage. Just make sure you're hitting the defense threshold. And speed is very viable on Aventurine in case you need to refresh your shield and refresh the amount of blind bet stacks that you can get from his follow-up attacks. Prioritize defense, speed, and crit if you want the extra damage that he can dish out. As for light cones, a lot of them give you extra defense, but the ones that stand out are Concert for 2, This Is Me, and Trend. Trend is really good for Acheron as Aventurine can provide her with an additional debuff. As for the Her to Store, Texture of Memories has better uses on other characters and doesn't suit Aventurine well since he will always have a shield and a lot of effect res. I really like Moment of Victory on him, it's been my go-to choice. Of course, it is a gacha light cone, so you may not have it, but if you do, it's a lot of defense, increased aggro, and more defense. His signature of course is incredibly strong with a 40% defense increase, more crit damage, and provides another debuff. It's a signature light cone. These things are practically always busted. As for relics, the go-to has always been Knight of Purity's Palace as the defense increase is nice, along with making your shield tankier. You can also run Dead Waters if your team is applying a lot of debuffs and it will give you extra damage, but mainly just Knight. This relic domain is also accessible very early on in the game, so you should have no problem getting to it, especially for newer players. As for planar ornaments, Broken Neo, as it's a free 10% crit damage to your entire team, as when you're shielded, you gain a ton of effect res. But Salatos if you want more damage. And you can run double defense pieces on these. The difference between imaginary and defense for damage on the sphere is very minor. Why not take the extra beefier shield just by running a defense sphere? And that's really it. You want 4k defense or more, a bit of speed, and if you want to gear him towards more damage, crit. As for his Eidolons, they're completely unnecessary unless you're just a greedy little gambler. The same goes for his light cone. E1 basically provides a 20% crit damage buff so long as your teammates are shielded. Plus, after he uses your ult, your teammates gain a shield equal to 100% of the one provided by your skill for 3 turns. Shields on top of shields on top of shields. E2 reduces an enemy's all type res by 12% for 3 turns with his basic. Very helpful as you're going to be using your basic attack a lot. E4 is more defense after triggering his follow-up attack and will increase the amount of hits that it will do, and E6 will turn him into his boss form when he rains down coins like he did in the cutscene. Overall, full Aventurine, you will not regret it. Even if the meta shifts to something completely ridiculous like shield pin and stuff like that, he'll still carry you throughout all the other parts in the game without a doubt. I hope you win your 50/50s, and I'll see you in the next one.